Warning: this story destroyed a marriage, friendships, and lives. If you're not ready for the truth, don't keep watching. Let's begin. Throwaway, because my husband is on Reddit, and yes, I know how that sounds already. I'm not here to be painted as the villain in your head, though I know that'll happen anyway. I'm here because I want advice, or at least perspective, from people who don't know us personally and won't text my sister behind my back. I'm 34F, my husband is 36M, married just under 8 years. No kids yet, which will matter later, even though he keeps pretending it doesn't. Our marriage, until recently, was fine. Not magical, not dead, just fine. Routine, predictable. The kind of relationship where you stop fighting because it's easier not to. Not because everything is actually resolved. First signs of trouble? Honestly, boredom. On both sides. He'll say it was distance or emotional withdrawal, but that's revisionist history. What actually happened is that we slid into this roommate phase where we talked about groceries and bills and whose turn it was to clean the litter box. Sex was inconsistent, and when it happened, it felt scheduled, like a dentist appointment you keep postponing. I started noticing he was more tired, more checked out. He stopped asking questions about my day and answered mine with one-word responses. I did bring it up, before anyone asks, multiple times. He'd nod, say he was stressed from work, promise we'd plan a weekend away. We never did. So, yeah, things weren't perfect, but they weren't a disaster either, which is why when everything blew up later, he acted like this came out of nowhere. It didn't. It just didn't come from his side first. That's all I'm going to say for now before people jump to conclusions. Next part, I'll explain how the cracks turned into actual problems and how he started noticing things only after it was too late. Here's the thing that's annoying me the most right now, how my husband keeps saying he knew something was off. He didn't. He noticed things after the fact and retroactively assigned meaning to them, like some wannabe detective in a bad Netflix doc. Yes, I changed a little. No, it wasn't dramatic. I wasn't sneaking out at midnight in a trench coat. I started dressing better for work. Not even better, just different. More effort. He noticed once, maybe twice, and made a joke about me finally using the clothes I buy. That was it. No concern, no follow-up. I was on my phone more, sure, but so was he. We both doom scroll at night instead of talking. Apparently when I do it, it's suspicious. When he does it, it's unwinding. I also started going to the gym after work. Again, not some wild shift. I'd complained for years about feeling sluggish. This was me taking care of myself. He praised it even, told me I seemed happier, which I was, honestly, and that part is important. What he didn't notice was that I stopped trying with him. I stopped initiating conversations that went nowhere. I stopped asking him to come with me places because he'd sigh like it was a chore. That withdrawal didn't bother him at all until later, when it became useful ammunition. There was one night, this is where he now claims the alarm bells started, when I came home later than usual. Work happy hour ran long, completely normal. I told him that. He believed me, or at least he didn't question it. At the time, there was no interrogation, no suspicion, no, we need to talk. Just a casual, have fun? And then he went back to his laptop. So when he says the signs were all there, I want to scream. They weren't signs. They were background noise in a marriage that had already gone quiet. I need to be very clear about something before the comments start sharpening knives. Nothing physical had happened yet. I know Reddit loves a clean timeline with a big red X where the cheating begins, but real life is messier than that. What did happen was that I met someone who paid attention to me. Cue the outrage. It was at work adjacent but not work, a vendor thing. Long day, bad coffee, name tags with titles nobody respects. He was funny in a dry way, older than me by a few years, divorced. Yes, I asked. And, this is the part that matters, he listened. Like actually listened. Follow-up questions, eye contact, remembered details. I didn't come home that night glowing or guilty or whatever dramatic nonsense people imagine. I came home tired and weirdly calm. My husband didn't notice. He was annoyed because the internet was slow, and our router is apparently my responsibility now. Over the next week, the guy and I messaged. Slack at first, work-related technically, then texts, innocent stuff, jokes, complaints. How was your day? A question I realized I hadn't been asked in months. Here's where I'll probably lie by omission, because that's apparently my personality now. I told myself this was harmless, that everyone needs someone to talk to, that emotional support isn't cheating, that I wasn't getting something from him. I was just missing something from my marriage. Meanwhile, my husband suddenly decided this was the week he'd start paying attention. He noticed my mood shifts, asked why I was smiling at my phone, asked who I was texting. I said, work stuff, without hesitation, which was mostly true, just not the whole truth. And if you think that makes me some kind of monster, fine. But it worked. He dropped it immediately. The unexpected part? 2 days later, my husband announced he'd planned a surprise dinner reservation. Out of nowhere, like the universe was mocking me. I went. I smiled. I wore the dress he likes. I even had sex with him that night, which I'm sure will horrify people even more. And lying there afterward, staring at the ceiling, I realized something that scared me more than guilt ever did. I felt absolutely nothing. After that dinner, I told myself I'd pull back. Classic lie. I even believed it for about 12 hours. The next morning, my husband was weirdly affectionate. Not over the top, just present. He kissed me goodbye, texted me a heart emoji before noon, asked if I wanted to do something that weekend. If this had happened a month earlier, it might have mattered. Now it just felt late, like someone finally reading an email thread after the decision's already been made. I didn't stop texting the other guy. If anything, I leaned into it harder. Still nothing physical, still lots of plausible deniability. I told myself I was allowed to enjoy attention. I told myself my husband had his chance. I told myself a lot of things. Then the universe, again, decided to speed things up. First unexpected event. My phone synced to our car. I didn't realize it at the time. We'd switched cars that morning because his was in the shop, and apparently my messages decided to make themselves very comfortable on the dashboard screen. Nothing explicit popped up. No names, no incriminating words. But there were previews, inside jokes. I can't wait to see you again. He didn't say anything right away. That should have been my clue. That night he asked, casually, who M was. Just one letter, just curiosity. I didn't even pause. Said it was a coworker, a group project thing, annoying but harmless. He nodded, didn't push. Second unexpected event. 2 days later, his mom called me, out of the blue, wanted to check in, asked how the marriage was going. I laughed it off, told her we were fine, blamed work stress, hung up feeling irritated more than guilty. That irritation is important. It wasn't fear. It wasn't remorse. It was annoyance that people were suddenly paying attention to a situation they'd ignored for years. By the end of that week, the other guy suggested grabbing a drink. Public place. No pressure. Just continuing the conversation. I said yes before I could overthink it. My husband, meanwhile, booked us a weekend getaway. Non-refundable. He was very proud of himself, so now I had 2 plans, 2 versions of myself, and no intention of choosing yet. So yes, this is the part everyone's waiting for. I met him for the drink, It was supposed to be one happy hour, loud bar, sticky tables, bad lighting that somehow made everyone look better. I even texted my husband beforehand, told him I'd be working late and might grab a drink with coworkers. Preemptive honesty. That's what I called it in my head. Unexpected event number 1. My boss showed up at the same bar, sat 2 tables away, waved, completely killed the secret affair fantasy vibe for about 10 minutes. Unexpected event number 2. I didn't care. We talked. We laughed. We complained about our jobs and our exes and how weird it is when you wake up one day and realize you're lonely inside a marriage. He said all the right things. Or maybe I just wanted them to be right. When he kissed me, it wasn't dramatic. No fireworks. Just easy. Familiar in a way that made my stomach drop afterward, because that's not how first kisses are supposed to feel. I didn't go home with him. Important detail. I told myself that meant something. I went home, showered longer than usual, and crawled into bed next to my husband like I hadn't just cracked something open that wasn't going to close again. He rolled over, half asleep, put an arm around me and said, "Missed you tonight." I said, "I know," and meant none of it. The lying ramped up fast after that. Not even elaborate lies. Lazy ones. Traffic. Work ran late. I'm just tired. The kind that work because nobody really wants the truth. Here's the part I haven't admitted out loud yet. I started picking fights on purpose. About dishes. About money. About nothing. If he was mad at me, I didn't have to feel bad. If he pulled away, it justified everything. And then, because timing is apparently a sick joke, he found the hotel confirmation email for our weekend getaway while borrowing my laptop. Non-refundable, romantic, thoughtful. I watched his face light up when he mentioned it, and instead of guilt, I felt trapped. I didn't know the exact moment my husband stopped believing me. Looking back, that's probably the scariest part. He didn't explode. He didn't accuse. He didn't go through my phone in some dramatic midnight scene like people expect. He just changed, quietly, the way someone does when they realize the rules have shifted and they need new ones. He started asking the same questions twice. Same wording, same tone, different days. I answered them slightly differently each time without noticing. That's on me. Who was at that happy hour again? Just coworkers. Which ones? A few. He began coming home earlier, sitting in the living room instead of his office, watching TV he didn't care about, watching me more than the screen. I'd feel his eyes when I stood up to grab water, like he was trying to catch something slipping. Unexpected event number 1, he cleaned the house, deep cleaned, like scrubbing baseboards cleaned. He said it helped with stress. I joked that he was nesting. He didn't laugh. Unexpected event number 2. My phone died one night while we were out to dinner. His phone, conveniently, had low battery too, so he suggested sharing mine for directions afterward. I handed it over without thinking. A message popped up while I was buckling my seatbelt. Just a name. No preview this time. But it was enough. He didn't read it. He didn't unlock anything. He just handed the phone back and said, "You've been popular lately." I snapped back something sarcastic, told him he was being paranoid, asked if he wanted to accuse me of something or just keep making comments like a teenager. He said very calmly, "No, I just wanted to see how you'd react." That shut me up. That night, he slept on his side of the bed, like there was a line down the middle. No arm around me, no goodnight kiss. I lay there wide awake, annoyed at him for making me uncomfortable instead of, stopping what I was doing. Here's where I lie even to myself. I told myself that if he really thought something was going on, he'd say it out loud. That until he did, I didn't owe him the truth. The next morning, he hugged me before work. Normal, warm. like nothing was wrong. 2 hours later, he texted me a screenshot. It was from our phone bill, itemized. Numbers I didn't recognize anymore, but apparently he did. I always assumed if I got caught, it would be dramatic. Tears, shouting, maybe him grabbing my phone and scrolling with that tight jaw thing people do in movies. Nope, it was a spreadsheet. He came home early, like middle of the day early. I was in the kitchen eating cereal straight out of the box because apparently I'm that person now. He didn't say hi, didn't take his shoes off, just set his laptop on the table and opened it. "I'm not mad yet," he said, which honestly, terrifying. "I just need you to answer honestly." On the screen was a breakdown of our phone records, highlighted numbers, frequency, timestamps, late nights, early mornings, gaps that didn't line up with anything I'd ever told him. I laughed, actual reflex laugh, said, "You made a spreadsheet?" He didn't react, just pointed. "Who is this?" I told the first lie that came to mind, said it was a coworker going through a divorce, emotional support. I even threw in a fake detail about his dog dying because apparently I'm unhinged. My husband nodded, typed something, then clicked a tab. Second spreadsheet, same number, same times, matched to my location history. Bars I'd never mentioned, nights I'd said I was home early. He looked at me then, not angry, just tired. Like he'd already grieved and was now in the paperwork phase. "Try again," he said. So I pivoted, downplayed. "Okay, fine. I met someone. It wasn't physical, it was just talking." I said it quickly, like if I rushed the words they'd carry less weight. He asked one question. "Have you kissed him?" I paused. Too long. He stood up so abruptly the chair scraped and tipped over. That was the first noise, the first crack in his control. He didn't yell. He walked to the bathroom and threw up. I heard it, every sound. When he came back, his eyes were red. He didn't look at me. "Get out," he said. "I need space." I asked where I was supposed to go. He laughed then, short, sharp. "Funny you're worried about logistics now." I packed a bag in under 10 minutes. Didn't know what to take. Took the wrong things, left important ones behind. As I stood in the doorway, I told him, this is the lie that still makes me wince, that I never meant to hurt him. He didn't respond, just sat at the table, staring at the spreadsheet like it might rearrange itself into a different outcome. Everyone imagines the confrontation as this single explosive event. It wasn't. It was more like a series of aftershocks that kept knocking things over when we thought the ground had finally stopped moving. I stayed with a friend for 3 nights. I told people we'd had a fight. I told my sister it was about money. I told myself he'd calm down, that once the shock wore off, we'd have an adult conversation. That was lie number. I lost count by then. He didn't text me, not once. On the 4th day, he asked me to come over to talk. Those quotation marks are doing a lot of work. He'd rearranged the house, not dramatically, but enough that it felt wrong. Photos gone. My shoes moved to the hall closet. The spare bedroom door open, bed stripped. It was like he'd already edited me out. We sat at the table again. Same spot as the spreadsheet. This time no laptop, just him, hands folded, very calm in a way that felt rehearsed. He asked for the full truth. I gave him a curated version. Admitted to the kiss, admitted to emotional cheating, swore there was nothing more. I cried at the right moments. I talked about feeling neglected. I said the word lonely a lot. I implied, without outright saying it, that if he'd been more present, maybe this wouldn't have happened. Yes, I know. I'm aware. He listened, didn't interrupt. When I finished, he nodded and said, "Okay, my turn." Then he told me everything he'd been feeling for months. how he knew something was wrong but thought pushing would drive me away, how the surprise dinner and the weekend getaway were last-ditch efforts, not spontaneous romance, how throwing up wasn't about anger, it was grief. That was the first time I felt something twist in my chest that wasn't annoyance or defensiveness. Then he asked one more question, quiet, surgical. "Did you sleep with him after I told you to leave?" I said no. This time it wasn't even true-ish. I'd gone to the other guy's place the night before. I told myself it didn't count because we were separated. I didn't volunteer that logic. My husband closed his eyes, took a long breath, and said, "I don't believe you." And that was worse than if he'd yelled. Here's something nobody tells you. You don't always get to see the damage you cause all at once. Sometimes it leaks out slowly, in inconvenient human ways that are harder to dismiss. After that conversation, my husband didn't kick me out permanently. He didn't beg me to stay either. He said he needed time and asked me to keep my distance unless it was necessary. That phrase haunted me. Necessary for what? Divorce paperwork, emergency contact stuff, closure. What followed was weeks of this awful in-between, where I saw the effects of what I'd done without being able to control the narrative anymore. He stopped sleeping, like visibly. Dark circles, weight loss, the kind of exhaustion that makes people look older overnight. Mutual friends mentioned he seemed off. One asked me if he was depressed. I shrugged and said he was just stressed. Lie. Easier than explaining I detonated his sense of reality. He started running. A lot. Every morning, every evening. He'd never been a runner. I overheard him tell someone on the phone it was the only time his head shut up. That should have crushed me. Instead, I felt weirdly defensive, like he was being dramatic. When we did talk, it was logistical. Bills, mail. Who was keeping the couch? He was polite in this distant, professional way that made me feel like a problem he was managing rather than a person he loved. One night, he accidentally called me instead of his brother. I heard his voice crack mid-sentence before he realized it was me. He hung up immediately. No explanation, no callback. That one hurt more than any yelling would have. I told myself he was overreacting, that marriages survive worse, that people cheat all the time and don't fall apart like this. I even told the other guy that my husband was being emotionally manipulative by acting so devastated. Typing that now, I know how bad it sounds. At the time, it felt necessary. If I let myself fully see his pain as something I caused, I'd have to feel it too, and I wasn't ready for that. The shift didn't come with an announcement. No "I've decided" speech. No dramatic text. I only realized something had changed because he stopped being sad at me and started being decisive without me. First sign, the bank account. I logged in one morning and saw the joint savings had been split. Not drained, not spiteful, just clean. Half moved into a new account under his name. He'd left a note in the app's memo field, temporary, for clarity. That wording made my stomach drop, more than if he'd written something angry. Second sign, he stopped answering anything that wasn't strictly necessary. If I texted about mail, I'd get a reply in minutes. If I asked how he was doing or tried to reminisce or, God help me, apologize, I got nothing. I showed up at the house unannounced one evening. Bad move. I told myself I was there to talk. Really, I think I just wanted to see if I still had access. He didn't raise his voice, didn't tell me to leave. He just stood in the doorway and said, "You need to text before coming over." I snapped back, "This is still my house." He nodded. For now. That, for now, echoed in my head the whole drive back to my friend's place. A few days later, he emailed me. Not messaged, emailed. Subject line, next steps. He'd scheduled a consultation with a mediator, not a lawyer yet, but someone to discuss separation options, timelines, asset division. He framed it like a project plan, bullet points, neutral language, no blame. I called him immediately. He didn't pick up. I left a voicemail saying I wasn't ready for this, that we should try counseling, that I'd end things with the other guy, that I was willing to do the work, all the phrases you're supposed to say. He texted back one sentence: I needed you to choose me before I had to protect myself. That was the moment I realized I'd lost leverage. Whatever power I thought I had, attention, excuses, emotional confusion, it was gone. He wasn't trying to win me back or punish me. He was stepping away from something that hurt. We met at a coffee shop halfway between our places, like we were co-workers negotiating a contract instead of a married couple deciding the fate of 8 years. He was already there when I arrived, sitting straight, coffee untouched, notes on his phone. That should have warned me. I launched into my speech immediately. Apologies, explanations, promises. I said I'd cut contact with the other guy. True, technically. He'd already stopped responding once things got messy. I said I'd do therapy. Individual, couples, spiritual. Whatever flavor he wanted. I said I finally understood how much I'd hurt him. He listened. Again. He's very good at that. It's probably why this all worked on me for so long. When I finished, he didn't argue. He didn't counter with his own list of demands. He just said, I believe you mean it now. That now landed like a slap. He told me he'd spent weeks replaying everything, every ignored gut feeling, every excuse he'd accepted, every moment he'd chosen peace over honesty. He said he wasn't angry anymore, and that scared him more than the anger ever did. Then he said the words I'd been half expecting and still wasn't ready to hear. I don't want to be married to someone I had to beg to choose me. No yelling, no drama, just that. He said he'd already committed to a separation, that maybe, months from now, they could revisit what reconciliation might look like. But he wasn't promising anything, and he wasn't waiting. He needed to rebuild himself without me in the room. I tried to argue logic, 8 years, shared history, the fact that people make mistakes. He stopped me. This wasn't one mistake, he said. It was hundreds of small choices, and I watched you make them. I cried then, real crying, the kind that makes your chest hurt. He didn't comfort me. He also didn't look smug or relieved, just sad, steady, resolved. When we stood to leave, he paused and said something that I still think about at night. I hope you figure out why attention felt more important than integrity. And then he walked away. Everyone talks about acceptance, like it's a warm blanket you eventually pull over yourself and sleep. It's not. It's more like realizing you missed the last train, and now you're standing on an empty platform, pretending you didn't want to go that badly anyway. After that coffee shop conversation, things moved fast and slow at the same time. Papers started appearing, dates, checklists, neutral third parties using words like equitable and reasonable, while my life got divided into columns. My husband, ex-husband in progress, I guess, handled it like a professional project. He stuck to schedules. He was polite. He never once asked how I was feeling. That hurt more than I expected, which is embarrassing considering I'd spent months not asking how he was feeling. Here's an unexpected event I didn't plan for. The other guy disappeared completely. Not in a dramatic, I can't do this way. Just stopped replying. No closure text, no fight. I found out later he'd started seeing someone else. Apparently I was an escape hatch, not a destination. I told myself I didn't care. I absolutely cared. I moved into a small apartment that smelled like someone else's cooking and had thin walls. First night there, I slept on the floor because my bed delivery got delayed. I stared at the ceiling and realized no one knew where I was, what I was doing, or who I was talking to, and for the first time that felt less like freedom and more like irrelevance. Meanwhile, my husband started looking better, sleeping, eating. He got a haircut. Mutual friends mentioned he seemed clear. That word stung, like I'd been a fog he finally drove out of. I tried journaling, therapy, running. I hated it. I tried telling myself this was growth. Some days it even felt true. Other days I replayed that coffee shop conversation and mentally rewrote it so I said the right things sooner. Spoiler, it never changed the ending. Acceptance didn't arrive as relief. It arrived as exhaustion, as realizing there was no more leverage, no more angles, no more stories to tell where I came out, misunderstood instead of wrong. Here's the part I tried hardest to avoid, because it doesn't come with a villain I can point at besides myself. Once the noise died down, no more urgent texts, no more negotiations, no more chances to spin things. I was left alone with patterns, not events, patterns. And patterns are harder to excuse. In therapy, yes, I actually stayed. My therapist kept circling back to the same question. When did you learn that being wanted mattered more than being honest? I hated that question. I still kind of do. It implies this wasn't about my husband at all, and I really wanted it to be about him, or the other guy, or timing, or boredom, anything external. But when I was forced to be honest, actually honest, not Reddit honest, I realized how much of my life I'd spent chasing validation and calling it connection. I liked being chosen, rechosen, noticed. I liked the version of myself that came alive when someone looked at me like I was new, not known. My husband knew me, knew my moods, my bad habits, my tendency to withdraw when things got uncomfortable. And instead of leaning into that familiarity, I resented it. That's the part I don't like admitting. I didn't just fall into cheating. I curated a situation where it felt inevitable. I picked fights. I rewrote history. I told myself stories where I was neglected instead of impatient, lonely instead of avoidant. I even caught myself rehearsing how I'd explain all this to future partners. Softer language, less accountability. I shut that down the moment I realized I was still lying, just to people who didn't exist yet. Meanwhile, my husband was building a new routine that didn't include me. New apartment, new friends, new boundaries. We barely spoke unless necessary, and when we did, he was kind in a way that felt final. I thought losing him would feel like punishment. It didn't. It felt like being exposed. I found out he was doing well in the most irritating way possible, casually. A mutual friend mentioned it in passing like it was weather. He seems good, honestly, lighter. He's doing this climbing gym thing now. You'd laugh. He's actually into it. That word again. Good. Not surviving. Not coping. Not bravely pushing through. Just good. I hated how much that bothered me. He'd gained clarity. That's the word I keep coming back to, even though it makes me wince. He stopped second-guessing himself. Stop twisting his instincts into knots to accommodate someone else's comfort. He trusted his read on reality again, and that did more for him than any apology I could have offered. He also gained boundaries, real ones, the kind that don't come with speeches or ultimatums, the kind that exist whether you like them or not. Watching him enforce them, calmly, consistently, was humbling in a way I wasn't prepared for. There was one last unexpected event I didn't see coming. He thanked me, not for the cheating, not for the pain, but for not dragging things out once he made his decision. He said it allowed him to heal faster, that if I'd fought harder, begged more, or tried to manipulate the situation, it would have kept him stuck. I didn't know how to respond to that. There was no angle, no comeback, just a quiet acknowledgement that he was moving forward, and I wasn't part of that motion anymore. Losing the marriage hurt, losing the version of myself that thought I could control how this story ended hurt more. Because here's the truth I keep circling. He didn't win by leaving me. He won by choosing himself without needing me to understand or approve. And I didn't lose him because I cheated. I lost him because I underestimated his capacity to walk away once he saw the whole picture. If this were my husband's post, and I've imagined it enough times that I could probably write it for him, it wouldn't be dramatic. It wouldn't be vengeful. It would be painfully calm. He'd say the hardest part wasn't the cheating. It was realizing he'd been negotiating his own boundaries for years, telling himself that love meant patience and understanding, even when it came at the cost of self-respect. He'd say the betrayal hurt, but the clarity afterward was what changed him. He learned to trust patterns instead of promises, to believe actions over explanations, to stop waiting for someone to become the version of themselves they keep insisting is in there somewhere. If he were giving advice, and I think this is the part that matters, he'd tell people not to ignore the quiet discomfort, just because nothing is technically wrong yet. He'd say that if you feel like you're shrinking to keep a relationship intact, something's already broken, and that choosing yourself doesn't make you cruel, even if someone else needs you to believe it does. As for me, I learned that lying doesn't always look like deception. Sometimes it looks like reframing. Sometimes it looks like therapy buzzwords and half-truths, and convincing yourself that intent matters more than impact. I learned that being desired is not the same thing as being trustworthy, and that confusing the two can cost you something irreplaceable. I don't expect sympathy. I'm not asking for absolution. I'm posting this because if someone reading it recognizes themselves in the way I justified things, maybe they'll stop before the spreadsheet stage, before the vomiting in the bathroom stage, before the calm email with the subject line that ends everything. My husband didn't learn how to forgive me. He learned how to let go, and that somehow feels like the most honest ending this story could have.